welcome to everybody. Over to you, Member for Wright.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister. And welcome, Mr Bernardi and Ms Ridstra. Good to see you both. Happy New Year to you. If I can refer you to, it's page 97 of Part C, the first page of the Education section of the Auditor General's report, and under significant events and transactions, the third dot point there, I note, talks about an independent chair appointed to the Capital Works Governance Committee. Could you perhaps tell us a little bit about who that chair reports to and their role, and why it was deemed necessary to have an independent chair?
The appointment, and the person in question was former Premier Dean Brown. The appointment was made by Rick Purse, the Chief Executive of the Education Department, and the reporting is directly to the Chief Executive on a fortnightly basis.
Thank you. What kind of selection process was in place for the appointment of the independent chair of the Capital Works Governance Committee?
I'll take that on notice.
Who was the person who appointed him? Was it you or was it the Premier?
It was Rick, wasn't it? Yeah, it was Rick Purse.
Thank you. I'll take you to page 99 under funding to support private schools. I see it refers to an increase of 12% in funding to private schools, in large due to the increase in capital funding enrolments indexation. But in reference to the capital funding in particular, Minister, I'm wondering, can you tell us how many loans or capital loans in particular have been approved for private schools since the change of government? Ideally, the value of those loans as a proportion of the overall increase in funding to the private sector.
Can I indicate that I suspect, while there is a loans program, and we can get some information, I'm sure, without too much trouble, although it's in the Treasury portfolio, but I'm happy to find it in relation to the loans program. The funding here also would be, and I think particularly references the grants program, which were
grants as opposed to the loans themselves.
And this was an election commitment from both parties, that there were $5.5 million for the Catholic sector, $5.5 million for the independent sector, and that's indexed, so I think they're a bit more than that now. This current financial year, not in the Auditor General's report, but the current financial year that we're in last year's budget, that was doubled as a one-off as part of COVID stimulus. And again, if the member has got a particular part of the question that I'm missing here, it's probably worth explaining the process slightly. Catholic Education has a process where they seek expressions of interest effectively from all of their schools and identify how to split up that $5.5 million in their grants. And in the independent schooling sector, there is a process where almost all of the independent schools get a smaller grant. They have to obviously identify the purpose for that, and it has to meet the criteria. But effectively, the methodology is based on their size as much as anything. So almost all of the independent schools are in that process.
Thank you, Minister, and I appreciate if this has already been published somewhere and I may have missed it, but is there a list somewhere publicly available of the private or non-government schools, I should say, that have been awarded capital funding? And does that list, if it indeed exists, include the amounts for which those schools were funded, or the amounts they were provided by the government?
Yeah, I think that it may well be... hang on. It's possible that these have been provided or are being provided through answers to omnibus questions from estimates as grants, and if that wasn't in today's batch that was with the Speaker, it's not far away. But if there isn't through that process, then we'll look into that for you.
Thank you, Minister. I would refer you now to page 100 under employees. The final paragraph of that page talks about SSOs or school services officers having increased in number by 16% or 977 full-time equivalents due to a number of programs over several years since 2017. I'm wondering, and I accept that this is not something you would have on you, but if a breakdown of the years in which the additional 977 or 16% of SSOs were employed across those years 2017, 18, 19 and 20 could be made available?
I believe we can get that for you and we'll make endeavours to do so.
Thank you, Minister. And on to the next page now, page 101. And the first paragraph of that page says that there was a decrease of 10% or 162 FTEs in admin staff. I wonder whether you could elaborate a little on that paragraph in this report about the areas from which those admin staff were, or the areas they were employed before they were no longer employed. Are they head office or Flinders Street staff? Are they? I assume they're not schools, but I'm sure you can clarify that for me.
I think that while the staff numbers being decreased are identified as 2020, I think that what we're seeing is the outcome of some of the efficiencies from the 2018-19 budget in particular. But nevertheless, there may be some other people. In terms of what the particular jobs are, I know that we have on occasion gone through some of these, but in relation to the 162 identified here, if there's a particular category, we'll look into that, and I think that that shouldn't be too difficult. Obviously, there's a range of ways in which we've had efficiencies and automation and doing our processes in different ways, and being able to reinvest a number of expenditures back into schools and education and other priorities, but what those particular jobs were, we'll take that on notice.
Thanks, Minister. And yes, I guess I'm just looking for some kind of assurance of sorts that they aren't being taken from school sites, and a sort of general idea of the tasks they may have been performing and how the tasks they were performing have been absorbed in their absence.
Yeah. So yes, you're correct that we're not talking about school sites. That's not to say that there might not be some admin staff in some schools that the principal may have determined was a contract that was no longer relevant, that was replaced with an SSO or an extra teacher, but that's not what this is talking about.
Minister, I will take you to page 103, and just below the graph there about automatic approvals, and I note that the Auditor General found that there was, although an improvement, which is a good thing, in the number of invoices, I guess, for minor works and maintenance expenditure that was being paid automatically without review. He noted that that had improved, but there was still $32.5 million in 2020 paid automatically without review or approval. I'm wondering if you could give some information to the committee about what is planned to bring that number down further.
I'm very pleased to provide some information. Minor works and maintenance performed at all government schools and preschools are managed by contracted facilities management service providers, so the invoices for the work performed are recorded in the Facilities Asset Management Information System, or FAMIS, which is managed by the Department for Infrastructure and Transport. Sites are expected to review and validate invoices in the Facilities Asset Management Information System, FAMIS, within 30 days. But to avoid adverse impact on contractors' cash flows, contractors are paid with 10 days by the facilities management service providers, subject to the submission of a valid invoice. The facilities management service providers then seek payment from the agency through FAMIS. The agency has 30 days to accept and approve or dispute the claim, otherwise it will automatically be paid after 30 days regardless of whether they are reviewed and validated. Sites are able to dispute the charges in FAMIS. When a job is disputed, this stops the invoice being automatically approved via the auto-approval process. When the dispute is resolved, the job is taken out of dispute by the site and approved for payment. So the Auditor General has acknowledged that a number of the changes have been implemented by the department and also the department that is now the Department for Infrastructure and Transport, and that has reduced the number of automatic payments since 2016 to the lowest level in 5 years. However, $32.5 million was paid automatically in 2020 to ensure that those contractors weren't out of pocket for work that had been done. So this issue has been raised by the Auditor General for a number of years. I have a feeling I may have even asked a question of a similar nature 3 or 4 years ago, it's possible. Although, of course, the numbers were different then because the number of payments without being reviewed and approved this year is the lowest in 5 years, which is an improvement. The automatic payments the reason there's a problem, and the reason the Auditor General is concerned, is that it increases the risk of paying for works not performed or being overcharged and the lack of delegates' approvals for payments, and you want to reduce that risk, obviously. So the Department for Education and the Department for Infrastructure and Transport have implemented several strategies over the previous years to improve the validation of invoices. There are new procedures outlining site responsibilities for approving invoices. There are FAMIS email reminders to remind sites to approve invoices 15 days before they would automatically be paid. There are monthly reminder emails being sent to the top 10 sites based on the number and value of auto approvals. There's an email addressed to the site leader and the education director being sent for sites that receive more than one reminder email per calendar year. So these changes have resulted in a reduction of auto approval statistics from 80% in 2016 to 27% in 2020. The department continues to monitor auto approvals, will continue to send reminder emails to sites, particularly the top 10 auto approvals by value or number, and our ICT division is developing a process to enable reminder emails to be sent to all sites with auto approvals in the previous month, regardless of the value or number of claims auto approved. It's expected that process will be ready for implementation for the beginning of Term 2 this year.
Thank you, Minister. If I could take you to page 104, where it talks about at the top of that page, the 32% of employee performance development plans overdue. And as per the previous question that I asked you, I note there's been some improvement here, but there are still 9,625 performance development plans overdue. My question is twofold. What are the ramifications of this for the employees whose performance development plans remain overdue, and what is the agency doing to reduce this number?
I thank the member for the very good question. The Performance and Development Guideline requires all employees with regular work arrangements to maintain a plan, a Performance and Development Plan, which I'm going to start calling PDP to reduce the risk of me misstating. So the policy requires that documented PDP reviews must occur every 6 months from the date the plan is made and must be recorded in HR's management system. Information system. So for new employees or employees new to roles, a written plan must be established within 2 months of starting. The importance of the PDPs, they help employees realise their potential through performance planning, learning and feedback, with a focus on their contribution to outcomes and improvements in line with the department's strategic objectives. And the department's management information system, the HR system, is used to record those completed PDPs. It provides regular reminders to managers and staff when the PDPs are overview, and that system also ensures visibility for executives regarding PDP completion within their division. As a result, many areas of the department have increased the number of employers having their PDP discussions every 6 months. We're not yet at 100% PDP completion, as we'd like to be, as has been identified by the Auditor General, but the improvement in performance has been from 38% down to 32% since last year. And the Auditor General has highlighted opportunities to improve the reliability of the review dates for PDPs recorded with the HRS. So we believe that the modest improvement that we've already achieved is as a result of greater awareness through improved reporting to education directors and executive directors on the status of PDP reviews. Potential factors contributing to those continuing overdue PDPs include issues relating to the recording in the system. COVID meant that from term 2, email reminders for PDPs were turned off and site-based employees were not required to document 6 monthly performance reviews given the dynamic situation in education sites for a period. So emphasis was placed on continuing informal performance discussions on a regular basis, and both email reminders and documented review will recommence during term 1 this year. We'll continue to have online training modules via Plink, face-to-face training available through the Leadership Development Unit, PDP reporting on a quarterly basis provided to leaders to monitor and advise of overdue PDPs, and Organisational Development Unit is doing follow-ups, and there's an update to the HRS module that's being used which should improve things as well.
Thank you, Minister. If we could go now to page 107. At the bottom there talks about the decrease in the SASF balances of 12.8 million. Does the Minister have any information that he can share with the committee, I guess, around how that $12.8 million generally speaking, was actually spent by sites to prepare the plan?
Sorry, to the member for Wright, could you ask me the question again? I understand where the reference. What was the information that you're seeking again, sorry?
So on page 107 at the bottom, the final sentence there, Minister, under the Schools Investment Fund cash balances, which it says have decreased by 12.8 million, in part because the department issued a site instruction to help sites to prepare a plan for using their balances. I'm just wondering, assuming that the plan itself is obviously not necessarily a cost item, how it resulted in a $12.8 million reduction in SASF.
So I'm advised, look, ultimately the SASF accounts and their expenditure is a site-based decision in 500 schools, and many of our 400 preschools are standalone, so there's many hundreds of SASF accounts out there, and so cumulatively, there being $12.8 million less, there'll be a number of reasons that those individual sites have spent less. But the instruction that the member's referring to, and that's identified by the Auditor General, is guidance that has been provided by Mr Bernardi's unit to all schools to help them manage their SASF accounts effectively. I'm sure that the member would remember when he was working in education that you would visit some schools that would have substantial SASF accounts that potentially they were saving more than they needed. There would be the opportunity for them to spend some, and some sites were running very thin. So the department's view, I think, is fair to summarise, and I'm sure I'll be advised if I'm wrong, but some extra guidance to schools to give them some extra comfort and confidence in their budgeting was seen as having value, and I think I've had positive feedback about it.
Thank you, Minister. And over to page 108, which talks about, and if I take you just below the graph again, the paragraph that begins with projections provided to us, which talks about a projected spend on sustainable enrolment growth of 131 million, but only 64 million of that was actually spent in 2020. Can the Minister explain to the committee why such a substantial underspend on that item?
So I'm advised that the initial budget allocation was that had $131 million expected to be spent in that year was based on the very preliminary expectations of cash flows. And of course, as the projects were developed, the expected timings of when money was going to be spent similarly matured along with the projects. So we have a higher rate of confidence in that. And I'm just checking one thing. And we are now catching up. I can advise that in 2019... Okay, so in 2019-20, some of this is directly relevant, some of it may be useful, but in 2019-20, the investing program spend was $165 million. The total 2020-21 investing program budget is $786 million. As at the 31st of December 2020, the budgeted spend was $227 million. The actual spend was $242 million. So we have gone from having that lag to catching up effectively.
Thank you, Minister. And if you are okay to do so, we could move to TAFE.
As the member indicated earlier, we had Chris Bernardi and Julianne Rietstra from the Department for Education. David Coltman, the Chief Executive of TAFE SA, may well provide me with some assistance throughout this section.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you for your attendance, Mr. Coltman. If I could take you to page 540 and under Statement of Comprehensive Income and funding from the Department of Innovation and Skills. I note that TAFE's main income source is noted here as being funding from DIS, or Department of Innovation and Skills, and that the total funding was $246 million. And then under funding for specific course delivery outlined in the Memorandum of Administrative Agreement, between 2020 and 2019, I see a drop of, what is that, 18 million from 146 million to 128 million. Can the Minister elaborate on why that quite significant drop there?
So there's several factors that are going on here. So, and I'm just check one. Do you have the page to 100? So some of the factors, as I understand it, are a $40 million reduction in funding in respect to lower campus lease costs following the transfer of the infrastructure assets to TAFE SA. There was a $10 million increase to offset the anticipated deterioration of revenue due to the impact of COVID-19. That was from DTF via DIS. There was a $10 million increase as a result of other variances, including indexation, and a $1.5 million decrease in excess staff funding. And I'm not sure if that's all of the, if that hits that $18 million mark that the member was identifying. But if it doesn't, we'll check and we'll let the member know.
Thank you, Minister. On the same table there, under capital funding, I see a decrease from 5 million in, well, actually an increase here in capital funding of 5 from 2019 to 15. So is that the 10 that you referred to in your previous answer that makes up the difference between 5 and 15?
Yes, I suspect the member's right there.
Thank you. If I could take you to page 543, under expenses and optimisation plan towards the bottom, in particular TVSPs. So I understand that on the following page 544, it talks about 444 TVSPs paid over this period, including 112 in 1920. I am going to ask a question that I know was a perennial favourite of the Honourable Rob Lucas in the other place, which he asked for many years, which was, do you have details on the average age and oldest age given of TVSPs under the 444?
So I'll take that on notice and see what we can find.
Be disappointed. Rob would be disappointed if I didn't ask that, I know. And I might also ask, Minister, if I could, that page 544 towards the bottom states that the number of TVSPs was 444 and 112 in 2019-20. I don't think I can make out from the graph above, though, the precise number for the other years across that period. If you're able to take that on notice, possibly, and get me that information.
I'll do even better than that. I'll get you the TVSPs and staff reductions for each of the last 10 years up until the last year in that graph.
Very generous, Minister, thank you. And on the same page, 544, under employee benefits, it talks about HPI's hourly paid instructors, and it elaborates on the decrease of $10 million in benefits to...
I don't have...
Page 544, towards the top under employee benefits. The second sentence under employee benefits states that they decreased by $10 million in 1920, and this was mainly due to a decrease in salaries and wages of $6 million, most of which was a decrease in payments made to hourly paid instructors. So can the Minister explain what was it that drove the decrease in demand for the number of hourly paid instructors? Was it fewer courses being offered by TAFE, or was it something else?
So TAFE SA increased its scrutiny in 2019-20 on the use of hourly paid instructors by implementing a workload management tool. The tool assesses the current workload demands of lecturers to determine capacity to undertake additional delivery before hourly paid instructors are engaged. The use of hourly paid instructors was also reduced during the COVID-19 pandemic, when TAFE SA transitioned to a blended delivery models during Term 2.
Thank you, Minister. So in the first part of your answer there, it talks about, I think the words were, and I paraphrase here, but words to the effect of a high level of scrutiny was cast upon the demand for hourly paid instructors. So is the suggestion there that previously they were being paid for hours of instruction that weren't in some way needed?
Again, I'll be corrected if I'm paraphrasing incorrectly the advice I've received over the last year or two, but one of the complexities was, of course, you have TAFE permanent staff who are able to deliver a certain amount of training, and the TAFE SA organisation has worked very hard to have a better record of how many hours they are delivering to ensure that they don't go over what they're supposed to, but also it's identified that there are some that have been able to deliver more hours than they were. And so rather than necessarily having to bring in an extra hourly paid instructor, if there was a permanent staff member able to undertake the task, then that enabled them to use the permanent staff member.
Thank you, Minister. If I could take you back just briefly to page 543 and the graph there about TAFE's total student numbers, which shows a decline there across 4 years. And I accept if this is a question you may not be able to answer off the top of your head, but hopefully Mr. Coltman can. Is that decline expected to continue into the next calendar or financial year?
With 30 seconds left, I'll take that on notice and so we can have another one.
If I could go back to the page previous to that one, Minister, page 542, student and other fees and charges, it said made up a total of 23% of TAFE SA's total income. Am I right to assume that, given other changes in TAFE around the number of courses courses which it will offer compared to what it offered in the past, is that income from student and other fees and charges expected to drop again? I'm advised that that depends on a couple of things, including the Commonwealth funding. So the Commonwealth Government's Adult Migrant English Program and Skills for Education Employment Program was $1.2 million lower than the previous year. That reduction is partially due to fewer migrants and clients undertaking the training during the 2020 COVID-19 period. And obviously, given the international border restrictions, then there's a significant potential ongoing reduce in demand there. And there may well be other factors as well, but that's the most significant one that jumps out at the advice that's provided to me. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm informing the committee that time has expired. We've completed the examination of the Minister for Education.